My story. The battle came to an end, but not the way that I had hoped and prayed for. My life lay in pieces before me, like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, shattered and broken. A 40-year struggle to overcome sexual lust and pornography eventually took its toll, and my husband gave up, ending his life here on earth. Do you divorce your husband after you find out 28 years later that he had many affairs, one of which involved an abortion? It's not that I wasn't suspicious, but I was working, taking care of our children, and studying. His involvement with pornography had also become apparent, and so began a marriage of lies, distrust, feeling worthless and degraded, and a destruction of sexual intimacy. In spite of all of this going on, my husband adored me, and this was shown with words of affirmation, gifts, cooking special meals, poems. He was a Christian man who went to church, Bible study group, prayed, read his Bible, but his journey was a continual battle with his addiction to pornography. We're gathered here to say no to pornography. You've taken a stand for your city, declaring Toowoomba a porn-free city. But 20, 40 years ago, people never spoke about pornography. Least of all if you were struggling with an addiction. It was so filled with shame and embarrassment that you didn't want anyone to know. An addiction to alcohol and drugs seemed more acceptable. Today, this is a very real problem which both men and women face, and it's been brought out into the open with help and support available. If one uses a scale, a balance, to visualize both sides of the issue, on one side, society has normalized pornography to such an extent that people would ask, well, what's wrong with it? Everybody else is doing it. What's the issue? And then on the other side, there are those who know that it's wrong and what devastation it's causing in their marriage and in the lives of their loved ones, and they want to be set free. On that day, 5 years ago, when my husband went missing, one bombshell after the next fell. The worst of all was the revelation of inappropriate interference with a young family member. That very morning, I had looked him in the eye and questioned him in this regard, and the reply came, no. A marriage full of lies, and now one final lie. Shortly after renewing our vows for our 40th wedding anniversary, I found my husband yet again watching porn on the computer. I was at my wit's end and filled with such a hatred for the woman in the sex industry. For the first time, my husband sought counselling, and during this time wrote a letter to me going right back to where it all began. An incident of sexual exploration between two children, which was beyond investigation. Interestingly, initiated by the little girl. Being caught out by his mother and threatened led him to associate this kind of activity with lies and deceit. This then was the root cause of where it all began. A lack of recognition and affirmation from a father who was largely absent from the home. And then his father's death at the age of 15 were just some of the other contributing factors which led him down this path. Also in this letter was an acknowledgement of my unconditional love for him. My mother didn't condone my relationship with my husband when we were dating, so when I married, it was a matter of, well, you make your bed and you lie in it. And so when the cracks emerged in my marriage, the one person I could not turn to was my mother. For 40 years, I lived with betrayal, hurt, disappointment, anger, rejection. I began to understand that as for some men, they can have sexual intimacy without being emotionally attached. I too became disengaged, my coping mechanism. All the while there was a battle going on in my mind. I wanted to get out of this torment, but then knew full well that if I divorced my husband, which he said to do, my husband was a high suicide risk, and I didn't want to end up blaming myself for that consequence. Because of my faith, I felt compelled to forgive and knew I had to stand by my husband while he fought his struggle. Who was I to forgive when I had been forgiven? I was also determined to uphold my marriage covenant, to love and to cherish one another in sickness and in health. Pornography is a sickness. Coming to terms with the loss of my husband, my companion, my friend, after a lifetime together in itself was difficult. The nature of his death, even more hard. There was also the seeming failure to win the battle over his addiction. It took about 3 years for me to finally grieve his loss because I felt guilty to grieve, because he had caused so much hurt and disappointment, not only to me, but my children. At the time of my husband's passing, my daughter estranged herself from me and our entire family, and I have not spoken to her or my 3 granddaughters for 5 years. I believe she blames me for the consequences of his addiction. That is, I should have left him. I grieved the loss of 5 loved ones. One of the toughest challenges that I've had to deal with is forgiving the woman that destroyed my marriage, my sexual intimacy with my husband, broke my family apart, and caused my husband to commit suicide. This giant was faced head-on during a talk by an American filmmaker and a Christian social activist focused on the issue of human trafficking. He told the story of a conversation he had with a sex worker in a nightclub, which he had gained access to for filming. When he asked her why she did what she did, her reply was, "I want to be loved." Immediately I heard a voice telling me I needed to forgive these people, whom I felt I had a right to hate. After all, I didn't know who they were just a group of people. Surely this hatred was justified. No, was the gentle answer to my justification. They are hurting too, seeking to be loved and affirmed. If they knew about my love, they would not be doing this. Everything inside me screamed as I wept, "No, no, no, I can't forgive them." By the time the talk was over, I had surrendered, and I forgave the woman in the pornography industry. I am set free from hatred and free to tell them about Jesus so that they may be set free. Through my relationship with Jesus, victory has triumphed over the circumstances in my life that sought to destroy me, and the puzzle pieces are put together now. He's taken the ashes for mourning and filled me with his inexplicable joy. And what was a grave, he has turned into a beautiful garden. I was lost and without hope, and if there was one thing I learned, it was to take eyes off self. We live in a world of self-gratification, and the more immediate the gratification, the better. Self-gratification is sought in every sphere of life, from material possessions to lust. What do I want? What's in it for me? We ask. When at my lowest, I asked God why I was here on earth. What was my destiny and purpose? I loved Jesus with all my heart, and I would rather just be in heaven with him. And with a chuckle of tenderness, God answered me, "Honey, I'm sorry. It's not about you. It's about me. You are here for my purposes. I have plans for you." Okay, I get it. God needs me here to accomplish his work. I don't need the reasons and the answers to questions anymore. And I dance on disappointments because I have hope in the plans that God has for me. Although I did not get to witness my precious husband's victory over pornography here on earth, he is at peace now, and I have been set free from the trials inflicted from an addiction to pornography. I share my story with you because through my vulnerability, I'm taking up the stand against pornography, and I say, it's not normal and it's not okay. Thank you for listening.